This early morning, let's find serenity by embracing sadness through meditation. An individual on Reddit asked, when we experience sadness due to unfulfilled expectations, what strategies can we employ to observe this feeling and help it fade away? So, I'm happy to answer this question, but we have to review some truths that most of us have been raised in such a way that these truths could feel uncomfortable. Yes, although emotions can feel pleasurable, they can feel painful, they can feel neutral. But that does not make them good or bad. There's nothing morally reprehensible about feeling an emotion. There are certain reprehensible choices, there are certain reprehensible utterances, there are certain reprehensible deeds. But an emotion is not one of them. And the opposite is also true. There's no emotion that makes us good. There are choices that make us good. There are statements, very kind and wise statements that make us good. There are kind and wise actions that make us good. But there is no pleasurable emotion that could possibly make us good. And the opposite's also true. Some people think that at the death of a loved one, if I don't grieve hard enough, I haven't really loved them. And the answer is no. There's no painful emotion that makes us good. Now, I don't want you to take these words at me blindly. This is simply a teaching I have learned from years of reading the Buddha's teachings and also years of practicing the Buddha's meditations. But that doesn't mean I'm right. Put these teachings into practice in the laboratory of your own body and your own mind at least once every 12 hours for the next 7 consecutive days, and then notice the results that you generate. The individual, when they wrote the original question, wrote, when we experience sadness due to unfulfilled expectations. Quite often, the reason we observe is not always the reason in play. Any good physicist, any good chemist will tell you that the equation, that the formula is always more complex than it seems, or at least often more complex than it seems. There are more variables at play. There is a story that is accredited to the Buddha, and I'd like to share it with you in an adapted form. A warrior was felled by an arrow. A surgeon ran to a sign. The warrior said, "You must not remove the arrow until I know the name, caste, and motivation of he who shot the arrow." To which the surgeon replied, "By the time that information is available, you would have perished." So the takeaway is that from this story is that it is a trap, is a dangerous trap to get lost in pseudo-intellectual explorations. A pseudo-intellectual exploration, sometimes known as a rabbit hole, but not always, can be a distraction from the pain of the moment. But remember, the first of the 7 enlightenment factors is mindfulness. Anything that undermines our mindfulness of the present moment, not concentration, but mindfulness, undermines our spiritual journey. So we are purposely pursuing some intellectual pursuit to take our mind off the incredible pain we're feeling physically or emotionally, we're missing out on a very powerful spiritual opportunity. Now, I'm not a masochist. Anybody who, my people with big noses, just like me, do not suffer in silence. We are not masochists. We're whiny. We invented our own word for whiny. It's called gvetchi. But we don't like suffering. But if we practice the 7 enlightenment factors in the heat of suffering, it can just spiritually catapult us forward, and that we cheat ourselves of that opportunity when we plunge into a pseudo-intellectual distraction. Allow me to remind you of what I often teach, that when we read the concluding passage of the Satipatthana Sutta, we learn that the Buddha made a promise that by practicing his techniques, we can master the path of enlightenment. Within 7 years, or 7 quarters, or 7 months, or 7 fortnights, or 7 weeks, or even 7 days. You can't earn a PhD in 7 days. Therefore, it is safe to assume the Buddhist method is not an intellectual method, nor is it a method of blind faith. It is a method of technique, a set of techniques that in a remarkably short time we can master to the point of practicing them spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. When we do this, when we metaphorically take the bull by the horns and exercise the courage to allow ourselves to feel what's going on, be it physical or be it emotional, that is when something that is very, I'm going to have trouble pronouncing this word, alchemic or alchemical, like the philosopher's stone of lore that turned lead into gold. By applying the 7 enlightenment factors to our present moment turmoil, can transform that pain into something very much like spiritual rocket fuel. I would like to start our formal meditation practice. But first, let's pause for approximately 2 minutes of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. Welcome to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generous support of viewers just like you through the Patreon platform. Either by using their smartphone, the camera, to capture the QR code, or by clicking the Patreon link in the description area below the video. If you love Star Wars and you wish to meditate as transformatively as Obi-Wan Kenobi upon the toasty sands of Tatooine, under the guidance of Qui-Gon Jinn, be sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. And now, as promised, let's turn to the right text, and that's not it. Let's hit button 9. That should do it. So this morning's practice text I've titled Secular Mindfulness, Meditation, and Contemplation. Requires no faith at all, no mythology at all. It is an adaptation of the Anapanasati Sutta. Now, just as every Olympic sprint ends with a finish line and begins with a starter's pistol, I found it beneficial to end every meditation with a short chant of universal love, and to begin each meditation with an even shorter chant to exercise our neural pathways for empathy and enthusiasm by performing the recitations of bodhicitta and refuge from a certain point of view. Together. May I liberate all beings from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging by relying on the moon as example, instructions, and students. May I liberate all beings from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging by relying on the Buddha's example, instructions, and students. May I liberate all beings from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging by relying on the Buddha's example, instructions, and students. In the Anapanasati Sutta, the Buddha taught 12 meditations and 4 contemplations that divide evenly into 3 sets. We begin with Kaya Sati's only set of 4 preliminary meditations that center our bodies. We're going to play with 2 rhetorical questions. By definition, our job is not to answer these questions, to seek an answer or receive an answer. Of all we do is play with the following words, reciting them silently and mentally, in harmony with our inhalation and our exhalation and our relaxation. We will grow. Our mindfulness, like a muscle, when exercised, will strengthen. The first 2 exercises, we're beginning with a sphere of mindfulness just large enough to encapsulate our respiratory system. So when we ask how long, we are throwing a question into the 3-pound squishy supercomputer between our ears to ask how long is this breathing. We're not trying to change the way we're breathing. We're just playing with words and breath and relaxation. Join me, please. We now play with the opposite. During the in-breath, we silently and mentally recite how. During the out-breath, we silently and mentally recite short. Once again, we're not trying to control the duration of our breath. We're just exercising our mindfulness. Some translate Anapana says Sati Sutta is in and out mindfulness, but the scholars I most resonate with translate it as mindfulness with in and out breathing. We're using our breathing the way a surfer uses a wave as a propulsion device. We now expand our sphere of mindfulness to encompass our entire body. We come to the third of Centering's 4 physical preliminary practices, where we mindfully notice and even investigate our bodies. Well, how do we do that? As we breathe in, we silently and mentally recite the sensory verb feel. As we exhale, we silently and mentally recite the noun form, which functions as a synonym of body. What kind of synonym? A monosyllabic synonym. We come to the fourth of Centering's 4 physical preliminary practices, where we allow our bodies to tranquilly relax. To facilitate this, during our inhalation, we silently and mentally recite the noun form. And when we exhale, we silently and mentally recite the verb calm. This is not an adjective, it's a verb. If this was an adjective, we would be practicing an affirmation. And an affirmation is just wishful thinking. It's a lie we tell ourselves with enough energy, enthusiasm, and emotion, hoping it'll come true, which is not the Buddhist path. We are treating this as a verb. We're treating this as an instruction. We're giving our own brain. We lead our intention with words. Intention leads our mind. Mind leads energy. Energy leads matter, or so the saying goes. Of course, the great irony is this. Every time we breathe out, whether we know it or not, we are accessing our parasympathetic nervous system, which is already wired for mental release and physical relaxation. So we don't have to contrive calmness. We just have to elicit it, like typing a specific key on your computer. When you type the Q button on the keyboard and you see it appear on your screen, an adult is seldom surprised. We continue with Vidanasati's set of 4 jhana meditations centering our feelings. Sadly, according to Sturgeon's law, 90% of meditation teachers are so fear-oriented that they can be described as rigid, fearful, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. And in the throes of elitism, they will say jhana is only for special people who do special austerities. No, it's available for everybody who does this practice. We begin with the first of 4 feeling-oriented centering practices, where we savor the first jhana's blissful joy that flows from gently grinning with the crow's feet of our eyes, the apples of our cheeks, and the corners of our mouth, towards our bodies of flesh, blood, and bone. Now, studies have shown that forcing ourselves to grin can exhaust our prefrontal cortex and elicit the symptoms of depression, which I do not recommend. So all we're going to do is simple. We're going to sit in an impeccable posture, and as we breathe in, we're going to just silently and mentally recite the verb grin, and as we exhale, we're going to silently and mentally recite the noun form. That's all we're going to do. We're going to silently and mentally recite these words in harmony with our inhalation and our exhalation and our relaxation. And we're going to let the 3-pound squishy supercomputer between our ears do the rest. If we automatically and effortlessly smile, that's cool. It's just forcing a smile that's bad. There was a wonderful Yoo-Hoo television commercial that illustrated that. When someone brings Yoo-Hoo into a stereo store, cranks up the volume, and places a Yoo-Hoo bottle on top of a speaker cabinet so that it can vibrate sufficiently to mix the drink. And the poor salesperson comes over with a plastered-on smile on their face, on their mouth that does not reach their eyes. We come to the second of 4 feeling-oriented centering practices where we savor the second jhana's peaceful joy that flows from gently grinning at the corners of our mouth, the apples of our cheek, and the crow's feet of our eyes towards our thoughts, emoting, intending, reasoning, recalling, and imagining. And clearly, we're using thoughts here as an umbrella term. As we breathe in, we silently and mentally recite the verb grin. And as we exhale, we silently and mentally recite our umbrella term, thoughts. We come to the third of 4 feeling-oriented centering practices, where we savor the third jhana's contentment by mindfully noticing, investigating, and coalescing our thoughts, emoting, intending, reasoning, recalling, and imagining. As we breathe in, we silently and mentally recite the sensory verb feel. And as we exhale, we silently and mentally recite the umbrella term, thoughts. We come to the fourth of 4 feeling-oriented centering practices, where we savor the 4th jhana's neutrality by allowing our thoughts, emoting, intending, reasoning, recalling, and imagining to tranquilly relax. We do this by silently and mentally reciting the umbrella term thoughts as we breathe in. And once again, for a second time, silently and mentally reciting the verb calm during our exhalation. We continue with Chittasati's second set of 4 jhana meditations that center our mind. We begin with the first of 4 mind-oriented centering practices, where we savor the 5th jhana sphere of infinite spaciousness By mindfully noticing, investigating, and coalescing our mind's ability to see, hear, feel, taste, smell, and the like. And clearly, we're using mind as another umbrella term. As we breathe in, we silently and mentally recite the sensory verb feel. And as we exhale, we silently and mentally recite the umbrella term mind. We come to the second of 4 mind-oriented centering practices where we savor the 6th jhana sphere of infinite awareness, which we generate by allowing our mind to gladden as towards it we gently smile once again from the corners of our mouth, the apples of our cheeks, and the crow's feet of our eyes. As we breathe in, we silently and mentally recite the verb grin, and as we exhale, we silently and mentally recite the umbrella term mind, which includes our faculties to perceive sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like. We come to the third of 4 mind-oriented centering practices, where we savor the 7th jhana sphere of non-graspability, as we allow our minds, seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling, and the like, to tranquilly relax in the most sustainable way. As we breathe in, we silently and mentally recite the umbrella term mind. And as we exhale, we silently and mentally recite the verb calm. We come to the 4th of 4 mind-oriented centering practices, where we savor the 8th jhana sphere of acquiescent non-labeling by experiencing the liberating equanimity of our controlling tendencies to shove and reach. As we breathe in, once again, we silently and mentally recite the umbrella term mind. This time, as we exhale, we silently and mentally recite the verb free, which is a synonym for release. We end with Dhammasati, also known as Anika Vipassanas, a set of 4 impermanence contemplations to help us circumstantially let go. So we continue, we return now to the wonderful world of rhetorical questions. The first of 4 contemplations, we shall consider course impermanence with the words, what change? We come to the second of 4 contemplations where we consider subtle impermanence. As we breathe in, we silently and mentally recite the word what. As we exhale, we silently and mentally recite the verb fade. We come to the third of four contemplations, where we consider very subtle impermanence. As we silently and mentally recite the preposition what as we breathe in, I think that's a preposition. If you think it's a different part of speech, let me know in the comment area. During the exhalation, we silently and mentally recite the verb cease. We conclude with the fourth of four contemplations, where we consider relinquishing, yielding, or surrendering, or simply letting go. As we breathe in, we could silently and mentally recite the preposition how. And as we exhale, we can silently and mentally recite the verb yield. Let us seal this morning's meditation and contemplations by chanting the 4 immeasurables. May everyone be free from misery, may everyone be happy, may no one be separated from the happiness, may everyone have balance from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging freed. If you feel that I have earned it, you could type something in the chat window. You could give this live stream, a thumbs up. You could share it with a friend. You could even help support this channel on Patreon. You could use your smartphone to capture the QR code. You could use your smartphone's camera to capture the QR code on the screen, or you can simply click the Patreon link in the description area below the video. In approximately 2 3/4 hours, well, that's not going to work out right. In approximately 10 3/4 hours, I would very much like to return to lead this evening's lesson and meditation. Until then, may you and yours be happy and healthy. And if you are as geeky as me, this is the way.